All right, everybody, welcome to week 2 of our learning. Yep, we're in the same clothes. I'm actually filming this the same day I filmed the first one, so I don't just wear this every single time I record. Although maybe that's what I'll do, just to keep you guessing. If you are just signing on for the first time, I'm going to encourage you to go back and watch the first video in this series first. As I explained in that first video, each of these videos, conversations, lessons builds off the prior video. So, I mean, you can watch this today in isolation and still pick up on some things, but to get the full, greater context, it is going to be essential that you go back and watch the other one. I want to say it's 12 minutes long, 13 minutes long. You can watch that and probably progress through and watch these in order. So again, this is number 2 that's being shared. So if you watched last week's, let's jump on in. Remember last week we spent about 13 minutes or so talking through the idea of mean, median, and mode a little bit. And how do we grade our students? Again, I'm not asking you just to completely change all of your grading. This is just foundational stuff before we start talking about some of the actual strategies that we can implement to make a measurable difference. So we talked about the idea of measuring growth and whether or not our grades actually provide that feedback of growth to our parents and to our students. Use the illustration of a student that had a 62 6 times on 6 assessments and ended up with a final score of 62 if we just find the average or the mean score by adding up 62 6 times and then dividing it by 6. We also looked at the other students, one that showed a pattern of growth, started off with really low scores, and by the end was getting scores of like 95%, yet when we averaged or found the mean of those scores, still ended up with a 62. And we saw the other student who started off really high and ended really low, yet still ended with a 62. We said that if we start measuring growth, or if we start looking at our grading system a little bit differently, that it tells a different story. And I'm going to follow that up a little bit today. Again, we're not getting to the point where we're starting to talk standard space grading or anything like that. Starting to have the conversation about feedback and how we measure student growth and how we use that growth to inform our practice and to tell the story both to kids, to parents, to ourselves, and to our colleagues. You know, you're meeting twice a month for 30 minutes or once a month for 60 minutes talking about student data. We have all kinds of data that is shared with us. I'm just trying to give you a little glimpse as to how we can better understand some of that data and maybe even communicate it and provide data that is more relevant to our own practice so that we can make the shifts that are necessary. Okay? So I want to show you these are my notes. I apologize. I might point to them. I might not, but it's going to remind me of my talking points. Most of us in our classrooms use a 100-point scale when we are communicating grades to kids. A student might turn in an essay to us, a report. Maybe they take a math test, a science assignment, some sort of project. They can get a score anywhere from 0 to 100, right? If a student does an amazing job, hits all of our expectations, it's amazing quality, we might give them a 100. Student doesn't turn in the work or it's completely off topic, we ask them to do a math assignment and they turn in a history report, we might give them a 0. The rest of it is somewhere in between. In our grading practices of 0 to 100, we really have 100 possible scores that a student can earn. Most likely, in that scenario, if we give 2 different teachers, 2 different instructors, the opportunity to look at the same assignment for a student. Student X, let's say it's my son Cameron, turns in an assignment and I ask teacher X to grade the assignment, and I turn around and ask teacher Y to grade the assignment. There's a possibility that with a 100-point range, those 2 teachers are not going to get things exactly the same. Teacher X might say my son gets an 85, teacher Y might say an 87. It might be a 91, might be an 89, might be 100 and a 50 in a wide range. Regardless, there's a 100-point variation. Now, that 100 points is critical because that decreases what we call inter-rater reliability, meaning if 2 different raters were to score the task, would it be reliable? Would we see the same score from both of them? The greater the variation, the greater the amount of points possible, the harder it is to get inter-rater reliability. I mean, imagine if we did a 1,000-point scale, and some teachers might give my son 850 points, another one might give 840 points. Now you can see the difference is now 10 points Although if it's a 100-point scale, 85 to 84, it's a 1-point difference. The smaller the number, the greater the accuracy or the reliability and inter-rater reliability there is. Some people in their classrooms don't use percentiles at all. They just use straight letter grades. Maybe A+, A minus, B+, B, B minus. If we use that system, there are 13 different possibilities. Odds are you give one assignment to 2 different teachers. It's going to be easier for those 2 teachers to reach agreement on the quality of that work by assigning it 1 letter grade of a B. Then you don't have to argue whether or not it's an 85 or an 84 or an 86 or an 83. A B covers a wider range. Because we've reduced it from 100 points down to 13 points, there's greater reliability. I want you to imagine that we reduced it down to 4 points. At the elementary level last year, I introduced the idea of using 4-point rubrics to increase inter-rater reliability, meaning 2 teachers are going to be able to see things the same way. It helps us standardize our measurement if we can reduce the variability. It allows us to have great conversations about whether or not kids are hitting the target if we can see things through linear lenses. Also, with the teacher evaluation process, for example, there's only 4 possible ratings. That helps with inter-rater reliability. If Administrator A comes into a classroom and observes and Administrator B comes in, they might see things through a slightly different lens, but with only 4 possible options of how to rate, it helps increase the reliability of those results. Now let's shrink it all the way down. Let's say that there's only 2 possible scores. And again, we're going to talk about this later on. I am not a believer in the idea of students simply got it or don't got it, okay? Not saying that at all. So when we say 2 lenses or 2 possible scores, for this example, we're going to talk got it, don't got it. We're going to look at it through the lens of possibly teacher evaluation. Let's go there, so it can be a slightly different conversation. Let's say instead of got it, don't got it, we're looking at effective or highly effective. And let's say that, unfortunately for you, I am your administrator, and I love getting into classrooms. And let's say that I get into your classroom a total of 12 times throughout the course of the school year. Okay, 12 different visits. I'm in there for 15 to 20 minutes at a time, and I'm rating every single indicator every single time, okay? So let's say that on visit 1 in your classroom, on indicator 3A, which is something about classroom instruction, you're effective. The green means effective. Second time I come, you're effective. The third time I come, you're effective. And each time I'm giving you feedback and some pointers and things to adjust. Fourth time I come, effective. Fifth time I come, effective. Sixth time I come, effective. Seventh time I come, effective. Eighth time, effective. But then the 9th time, you've now increased and you're highly effective. 10th time, highly effective. 11th time, highly effective. 12th time, highly effective. Going back to what we talked about last week, if we took the average of all of these scores, your average is going to lean towards the effective side. The preponderance of evidence is effective. You had effective more times than you had highly effective. But now I want you to think about the pattern. When did you start to score highly effectives? The highly effectives were as a result of lots of great evidence, lots of great feedback, lots of great conversations, and you showed tremendous growth. And now you've got this consistent pattern at the end of the year of showing highly effective instruction. Now, if I were evaluating you and I was looking at this pattern, at the end of the year, I would give you a highly effective score because you showed me that you can do it. And ultimately, the point of a grade, a score, a label, is to simply provide feedback about where somebody is at any given point. It wouldn't be fair for me to give you lots of great feedback, for you to apply that feedback, for you to show lots of effort and intentionality, show tremendous progress and growth, and then for your score to basically reflect what it was at the very beginning. Let's take it a different route. Let's say that your scores look like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Let's say your scores now look like this. Okay, remember the greens are effectives, purples are highly effectives. The first 3 observations in that 1 indicator, effective, and then you show highly effective. Then it's effective, 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 highly effective. Effective, 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 highly effective. Actually, let me do this. So it's the exact same pattern as before. Remember before we had 4 purples? We still have 4 purples. But notice this time, those purples are more sporadic. There's no pattern. In this case, although the math would be the same, This one, I would argue, is effective because we don't see any consistency in our pattern. We don't see that the scores are a result of consistent practice and consistent evidence collection. Because they're more sporadic, I would have a more difficult time saying that I can reasonably and reliably demonstrate your grade as highly effective based off of the evidence. Now, it's extremely important for us to have this conversation because reliability is a key tenet in terms of our feedback to kids and our feedback with each other. If we're going to have conversations about our data, if we're going to have conversations about whether or not students are growing and improving, we have to make sure that the way that we're seeing students and the way that we're communicating student progress is consistent. Reliability is extremely important, and so is how we measure our evidence. The collection of evidence, another way to phrase that, is assessment, is extremely critical. Because based off of these patterns, we're going to be making some decisions. We're going to be making some instructional decisions. Do our students got it, or don't they got it? Are they growing, or do we need to continue to stay on course and provide interventions? In our first example with evaluation methodology, when that teacher showed 4 consistent examples or 4 consistent assessments with highly effective evidence, if I were the teacher or the coach or the guide or the administrator, I would say, this is a teacher that's got it. I don't need to continue to provide interventions. I don't need to continue to focus in on this topic because this teacher showed consistency. If this were the case, however, I might look at this and say, okay, we haven't demonstrated mastery yet. I need to continue to stick with this. One of the conversations we'll have in a couple of weeks is the idea of formative versus summative assessment and if there really is a difference. Because truly, every assessment should be considered a valid and reliable assessment. We need to get ourselves to the point where we understand that every single time we collect evidence from students, it's an opportunity for a student to show us mastery, show us what they know, and for us to make instructional decisions. The days of saying, well, this is a formative assessment and this is a summative assessment really led us astray. All assessments are formative and summative. It's not what we call it, it's how we use it. Once we get to the point where we can look at data through a lens of it's all valid, it's all reliable, now what is it telling us and how do we make our instructional decisions, then we can start to make some meaningful progress. Hope you have a great weekend.